Let me share my personal experience with you. So I came to this country, as I've said so many times, ignorant of a lot of things, and the bar was one of them. I didn't know if I wanted to ride the bar. At the time, my mind was just come to the US. There was so much discouraging news out there that I was like, come to the US, you'll figure it out. But then I got here, and there was so many questions about, do you want to ride the bar? That would affect the classes that you take. That would affect the state you should be in, and things like that. So that was really confusing for me, right? I eventually wrote the New York bar, but I schooled in Washington, and I could have taken the Washington bar. And honestly, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe that would have made things easier for me. So let's talk about things you should think about now about the bar before coming to the US. Or if you're here, then and you're thinking about, should I ride the bar or not? Then this episode is definitely for you. So let's deal with the first question. Do you need to ride the bar? So I want to be clear first of all. The fact that you've got a JD or an LLM does not give you a license to practice law in the US. You need to take a bar exam. The question now becomes, what bar exams, right? Because there are 50 states in the United States. License to practice law in New York does not mean you can practice law in California. License to practice law in Washington does not mean you can practice law in Texas, right? So you need to think of what state you want to write the bar exams for. Where do you want to be licensed? As you think about why you should write the bar, whether or not you should write the bar, also know that the bar does not give you immigration benefits. Some people think, oh, if I write the bar, then the US has to give me a job and help me with my papers. No. Writing the bar does not give you immigration benefits, but one thing I would say is that it does open doors for you, right? So if you want to practice law, you need to get licensed to practice law in the US, period. You can't practice law with your LLM unless it's an internship where it's some sort of apprenticeship, but you cannot practice law in the US without getting licensed. I'm sure this is the same thing in a lot of our home countries, but I just wanted to be crystal clear and let's set that as a foundation. So think about this. It does not give you an immigration opportunity, but it does open doors for you and enables you to practice law here in the US. And also, if I'm being honest, internationally, there are a lot of opportunities where they see license to practice in the US is a requirement, right? A lot of magic circle firms like multinationals not always, but sometimes the fact that you've been licensed to practice here speaks to the fact that you're international and you're global in addition to your home countries, right? Something else you should bear in mind is that for a lot of these exams, for you to be able to write the bar here, for a lot of them, right, they kind of not require you, they have different requirements, right? Sometimes it's easier for those who have been called in their country, right? So for me, I am licensed to practice law in Nigeria. That made things easier for me here, right? Or if you're licensed to practice law in a common law jurisdiction, to a large extent it helps you here. But if it's civil law, it looks like it's a bit stringent. Please fact check and check with your resources. I'll provide some resources for you in the description box. But these are things you should think about, right? So if you're thinking of rushing to come here and you want to ride the bar, perhaps you should think of getting licensed in your home country. Because I know someone who that happened to. She did her master's, wanted to ride the bar here, and it felt like, right, things would have been easier if she had just gotten licensed. So she went back home to get licensed and then returned to write. So that was just a lot of hassle, right? So please think about that. Additionally, I just want to say that you are not required to write the bar exam. It is not a requirement, it's a choice, right? And there are job opportunities, like maybe if you want to do policy work, or international trade, or even arbitration. I've seen there are a lot of those positions that I feel, please fact check me again, right? I feel like there are some jobs I know that there are some positions that are, policy related or that don't require you to get the bar. So look, what I always say is, before you come here, if you want to be extra, try job searching. Right? Try just, on LinkedIn, put what you want to, the positions you're interested in. Look at the requirements. That will tell you whether or not you need to write the bar. So if you search it up on LinkedIn and you see, oh, there's no bar required, you're good. But if you are going to practice law here, you just need to get licensed here, period. Next thing, now let's talking about picking a state, right? That can be very complicated. Something I would say is, for me, it was important that I pick the UBE state, right? Now, what does that mean? The UBE is the Uniform Bar Examination, and it's administered by the National Conference of Bar Examiners. Now, why is that important? Remember I told you there are 50 states here. If you pick a UBE state, what happens is that it's easier for you to port. It's the same exam. Right now, this is what I know. It's the same exam across these UBE states, right? And so what happens is easy for you to port. It's easy for you to, like, if you write the New York exam, there are some requirements that you can just transfer your score to Washington State without having to write the exam again. But there are some states that you can't do that. Example, I think California and Nevada are not UBE states. And so the fact that I've written the California bar exam does not mean I can transfer my score to New York. Now, I don't know if there are any exceptions to this or not, but this is what I know based on the information I've gotten on the website. Please fact check. Make sure you have your information based on your own research. But what I will say is, picking these states helps with portability. Now, the fact that you've written this exam, right, and it's a UBE state does not mean you get automatic admission across those UBE states. They still have like their licensing requirements. So, like, for example, I wrote the New York bar. I passed the New York bar. I had a very high score, or my score was high enough that I could get admitted across the country. But there were still licensing requirements. Like, some states still require that I take some classes. Like Washington State requires that you take maybe your constitutional law, professional responsibility classes, and things like that. And there's some other states that have like cut-off scores. So, like, if your score is high enough for New York but it's not high enough for another state, you can't get into that state even though you wrote the UBE exam. But what I would say that UBE helps is portability, right? So that and there are actually like time frames for you to port, right? So the fact that you've written the UBE or the New York bar, I would call it, you've written that exam does not mean you can port like 10 years later. No, I don't think that's possible. I feel like for some states, there are like limited time frames for during which you can port. What does porting help you do? It helps you with getting licensed in multiple states. So if you're in New York and you want to move to Washington, you can do that and follow their licensing procedure without having to write that exam again, because that exam is no joke. It's not an exam that you write 2 or 3 times, unless you're a guru, right? Unless you have some, you know what I mean. If you don't have it, please, I would always advise that you go for a UBE state. But California is also a very wonderful market for attorneys. So if your mind is set in Cali, why not pursue Cali? I know folks who are like, doing really good in California. So that's something you should bear in mind. Where do you want to write? UBE, non-UBE, and what are the pros and cons? Now, another reason why writing the bar is an important consideration when you're actually coming to the US is because some states have class requirements, right? So there are some states that require that you take some classes like civil procedure, constitutional law, professional responsibility. And what does that mean? Credits. What does credit translate to? Cost, money, right? So you should think about that. You should ask questions about what classes will I need to take if that's something you want to do. Because if you decide to pursue only your specialization classes, right? What I mean your specialization classes, so only courses that are related to the specialization that you're pursuing, and you're not thinking about these bar related classes, what happens is that you come to the US and you have to incur on unexpected expenditures. That's what happens, right? Because you need to still pay for those bar classes you have to take, since there are requirements for your state. So as you're picking states, think about it. For New York, please, once again, do your research and check. But for New York, I did not have to take any classes because I had already been called to practice law in a common law country. Nigeria, right? And so I believe that helped. But I would do a special episode on writing the New York bar because a lot of internationals write the New York bar. I'll talk about all the requirements and stuff like that. But please, the reason why it's important for you to think about this is the classes and the cost that it translates to. Because as you take this X more classes, constitutional law, professional responsibility, your tuition is getting, it's increasing in amount. So think about that. It's really, really important. Last thing, now one other consideration is think about your market. This is obvious, right? If you're going to get admitted to a place, think about the market. Is it good for your specialization? Is it good for what you want to do? So that if you go and write the bar and it's not necessarily a good market for your specialization, it's going to be a waste. So please think about that. That's important. But I hope this has been useful for you. I get a lot of questions around this bar, and it's such an important question, and I'm happy that you're thinking about it at this time. So please take all this that I've said into consideration. I look forward to seeing you on the next segment. Actually, if I'm being honest, I'm super hungry. I have to go and eat food. So I'll see you when I see you next. Have a wonderful one. Bye.